Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryamkaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Dear friends, I have very great pleasure in welcoming all of you to today's Pratibha Mancha presentation, the 59th in the open-ended series. So we do not have an upper limit for this. Hearty welcome to you. Today's learned speaker is Dr. Hemalatha Hemachandra. She is a very highly respected physician from Indianapolis. She has actually told me that I should not speak too much about her, and in respect to that, in deference to that, I'll keep it very short. You have all known her already. But one of the things that that is very special about Dr. Hemachandra is she's a very ardent devotee of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So that gives us a very authentic reason why she should speak. She has been studying Vedanta with me for over 20 years. And then I have basked in the most cordial hospitality at their home in Indianapolis, so for over the last 2 decades. A very hearty welcome to you, Dr. Hemalatha Hemachandra. There is a very well-known pranama mantra for Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Sarva dharmaswarupine
Avatara Varishtaya
Ramakrishna
te namaha.
A little background about this shloka. This shloka burst out in an extemporaneous manner from the mouth of Swami Vivekananda in February of 1898 at one of the Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's disciple Navgopal Ghosh in his house in Ramakrishnapur in Howrah. There the occasion was they were installing a marble statue of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in Navgopal Ghosh's house. And Swami Vivekananda was asked and invited to inaugurate and worship and consecrate the image of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And the moment he stood in front of that, he burst out with this prayer. A couple of points to note about this prayer. First thing is Swami Vivekananda was never a person who would even worship God for that matter, let apart human being. So that was the mind of Swamiji. And imagine him coming out and calling Sri Ramakrishna as Avatara Varishtaya. Varishtha means the highest. So the question arises, there are avatars and avatars and avatars. But then how can you grade an avatara? How can you create a gradation? This avatara is ordinary, this avatara is a medium, and this avatara is a varishtaya. So how did he come out with this avatara varishtaya? And also if you look at the prayer itself, avatars establish dharma. And Krishna has also said that yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever dharma is challenged, then an avatara will happen. And avatara is also dharma swarupa. That is, Krishna is not different from dharma. Rama is not different from dharma. So that means that the very manifestation of an avatara is the manifestation of dharma. In fact, Marija, in his talking about Sri Rama to Ravana, he says, Ramo Vigrahavan Dharma. Rama is the very personification of Dharma. Therefore, Avatara has got two fundamental purposes. One is that it has got to establish Dharma, and the second is the Avatara itself is Dharma Swarupa. So, but how do you grade? Why did Swamiji say that Ramakrishna is Avatara Varishtha? He himself explains in this prayer, Sarvadharma Swarupine. Sarvadharma Swarupine. He was not just an embodiment of one dharma, but all, the entire dharma. To speak on such a personality as Sri Ramakrishna, one should be an ardent devotee of Ramakrishna also. Then only truly we can express how we feel about this personality about whom we are speaking. Dr. Hemalatha is such a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and she is the most appropriate person to speak on him. Once again, I extend a very hearty welcome to each and every one of you, and especially to Dr. Hemalatha Hemachandra, and I request you, Hemaji, to please commence your presentation. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you so much for that. I was going to chant that, but your background about Vivekananda uttering it out of his heart was wonderful. And also the Sarva Dharma Swarupine, So that is, during the process of my talk, I will bring that out also. My title of this talk is to introduce Sri Ramakrishna to the people who don't know him as a great wonder. That's what I would call him. Some Swamijis call him a phenomenon because he cannot be confined to just a saint or a mystic or a gnani or this or that, because that limits him. And I'm very thankful for Ashwatji to suggest even this topic, that I delved so much deeper into it while researching for this paper especially. I'm very, very thankful for all this. And I was brought into Ramakrishna's fold when I got married, and I'm very, very thankful to my husband Hemachandra and my mother-in-law, who actually gave birth to my two brother-in-laws are Ramakrishna order sannyasis. So I have seen this order firsthand in various regions, and just see the continued production of these pure souls in all kinds of order. And this is just how it has stayed pure through these years, and how Ramakrishna said, no Kamini, no Kanchana. So that has held this order so firm over the years. So even my own guru, who is Swami Chetanananda from St. Louis, whenever he's in need of funds for a publication, he publishes so many books on Ramakrishna. He always tells Hemalatha, I cannot ask money because that's against the principle of Ramakrishna. He would say no. He said money should never be asked. This is how this order survives. All right, so coming back to my presentation, I would compare like Buddha was a light to the East. As we see the popularity of Vedanta now in the West, it seems like Ramakrishna was the light to the West through Swami Vivekananda. And interpreting him is very difficult, and it's always limited or hindered by our own limitation of understanding him. Like I was telling Ashwatji this morning that 30 years ago, I knew him just as this big Kali worshipper, and he visualized Kali, and that's all I knew. The more I studied Vedanta with Ashwatji, and I started understanding what a Jivan Mukta is or what is Brahma Gnana is, I see him in so much more light today than I did 25 years ago. And I'm very thankful for that journey. And actually, Swami Vivekananda was accused when he came to America that people said, you talk about Upanishads, you talk about Vedanta, but you never talked about your master. And his answer was, I did not want to confine him in a few words or a speech. He said, he is so much more for me that those words would limit him. Like the Upanishad says that it's not available for your mind or for the word, the concept of God. And that's how Vivekananda felt. In fact, they told him to write his biography, but he said, I cannot. I just don't understand him totally. He's so vast. He said, and actually he told Swami Sharadananda to write the story, and he edited it, but not much editing went on. But he said, looks fine. And he gave it for publication. So he was like a Jivan Mukta who lived in this world full of bliss. And I just want to play Swami Sri Ashwatji had sent us this poem by Swami Vivekananda on Vivekananda Jayanti this January. I'm just going to play a few this song. So the description of this is Ramakrishna rose as a taranga, like a wave on the Shakti's Samudra. He showed various sports of divine love. He came as a great weapon of destruction for the demon of doubt. When we hear about Rama destroying Ravana and Krishna destroying so many asuras, we think, what did Ramakrishna do? This was for Kali Yuga, the biggest problem of the youth was the doubt that does God really exist? And then he says, I surrender myself to this guru who is a physician for the malady of samsara and who dwelt on the non-dual plane of chitta, yet did Leela on earth for the good of humanity by covering that Advaita Gnana with the cloth of supreme devotion. This is what this song meant. So when we're describing it as a holy man, a mystic, or a saint, or avatara, I just want to spend a few minutes about how do we define an avatara. So an avatara comes in a special upadhi or body, and they bring spiritual awakening to large masses of people. Not when they're alive, maybe a small group, but after they pass away, it keeps on spreading in waves after waves after waves. And Ashwatji himself mentioned right here in my house that we mortals, after 3 generations, nobody even remembers us. You know, like we are like written off, like they don't even know our last name or who we were. But when you look at the waves of spiritual awakening happening from this person. And the other thing about an avatara is their name itself becomes a mantra. And another thing is the study of their lila or their story, like the Bhagavatam we study, or the Jesus disciples study their story. It keeps on awakening more and more as we study their, like we're studying Ramayana, awakens people even today, or how the Gita is continuing to enlighten people even today. So this is the characteristic of an avatara, and we see that happening with Sri Ramakrishna's Leela as well. And also very unique about him is he's so unique that he doesn't fit into any category, like call him Advaitin or Vishishta Advaitin. He's everything and more. So is he a Saguna Upasaka or a Nirguna Upasaka? But he is both, which we don't see normally in any particular. So I will, as I go through his story, I'll tell you all the very uniqueness about this character who lived he was born 186 years ago on this earth. You know, we go to Taj Mahal, the wonder of brick and mortar, or we go to Ripley's Believe It or Not. But I find Ramakrishna as the greatest wonder, who actually, you know, talked to God. Like we all know Vivekananda's the famous question, have you seen God? And he was a 19-year-old youth at that time. And he just did not have any belief that God really existed. And Ramakrishna, without 1 second of a hesitation, tells him, I have seen him, and I see him more clearly than I see you right now, which was just amazing for anyone. I don't think contemporarily anybody can say that. Maybe they can experience God, but Ramakrishna was such a unique wonder that I feel I should we should be telling about this wonder to our children and grandchildren. I always tell my children that my grandchildren should grow up knowing that such a wonder ever existed on this earth. So coming to Sri Ashwatji's, he also mentioned that he came for the resurrection of Hinduism and Stapakaya Dharmasya. So he came, and what was happening to Hinduism at that time? At that time, we were after many years of Muslim rule, and then there was the British Raj at that time. And that is why, like we say in Kenopanishad, not a blade of grass can move without Brahman's will. So Ramakrishna comes to Calcutta. You know, it is just so amazing for this Leela to happen. Most of the youth were moving away from scriptures and Murti Puja. At that time, Brahma Samaj was raising its head and Arya Samaj. So the British were all teasing them and telling them, you are heathens, you worship too many you're idol worshippers. So the youth, the modern youth who are being trained in these British schools wanted to move away from our natural way of life in Hinduism. And I feel that is the reason that India needed that kind of a phenomenon at that time. The doubts about the existence of God plagued the youth at that contemporary time. And he came to prove to the skeptics, literally for the skeptics, like verily, he created a God realization laboratory in Dakshineshwar. So through his various sadhanas, for many more future descendants to follow and prove, he said, yes, you can do this and reach God. You can do the other path and reach God. Like he taught so many methodologies. It's kind of a wonder that he came exactly for these skeptics who did not believe anything that the scripture said or anything. So a live person had to come and re-enthuse the religion to say, yes, whatever the scriptures say, and everything he could practice and show the various paths. And also the way he taught in his short life of 50 years, like you could be an illiterate, a housewife, an alcoholic, a pure sannyasi, or another caste, not a Brahmin, but a lower caste householder, rich or poor. everybody could realize God. That was what he showed at that time. And you just choose bhakti, or you could do yoga like the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, just to do Nama Japa or Saguna Ishvara, or go to the highest Advaita. That is what we find in his order. Like you can choose any path you like, and your personality fits into any path. But yet he always said God realization was the main purpose for human birth. He kept saying, if we actually study his gospel in my house once a month, and every other page, that is what it is. Think about God, God realization, go do satsanga, go do solitude. Please realize God in this life itself. And that was his main purpose at that time, to prove to the skeptics that God really does exist. And one very important thing we all should remember, that I will go through his sadhanas, but like Ashwatji mentioned, he came for actually the harmony of religions. That's a very, very unique to him alone. You know, we are as Hindus, we are tolerant, and we might say, oh, Christians are good too. We won't tell like Christians that you will go to hell because you don't believe in Hinduism or something like that. So that is called a tolerant attitude. But Ramakrishna was not like that. He actually did sadhana in each dharma, through the Christian dharma as well as the Islam dharma, and experientially proved that all these are just paths. They differ a lot, but the ultimate result is the same. So that is why today it is called non-sectarian philosophy, which is why it is very much liked by youth and the Western countries. Right now, he has a center in like Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Brazil, Argentina. So many countries are very open to this because there is no sectarianism in there. And that was very unique to this Avatara. So the source material for this, his life, there are two main books. One is the Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga, written by his direct disciple, Swami Sharadananda. And that was actually translated to a very good English by Swami Nikhilananda in New York. And he was helped actually by, at that time, the president was Woodrow Wilson, and his daughter, Margaret Wilson, helps him put it into the proper English. And that is one of the famous Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the translation of the Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga, as well as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. One source book is his life story written, and the Sharadananda took at that time. This was written after Ramakrishna passed away, but Holy Mother was still there to authenticate everything that he told or wrote. And also his nephews were there who used to take care of Sri Ramakrishna. So the source material of what Sri Sharadananda wrote is very, very authentic. And the second book, it's never been a book like that, which is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, written by a Bengali person called Mahendranath Gupta. We call him M. And in Kannada, Kuvempu writes it as the Vachana Veda. We call it the Vachana Veda, and he also calls it the Panchama Veda. And that book is so unique. Why? Because it was written right when Ramakrishna lived. Like, unlike we hear Jesus said this and said that, it was a reminiscence by his disciples later. So, but we don't have a verbatim question and answers for 4 long years. There are 177 entries, and with no bias, no interference about, I thought this, he thought this, nothing. It's a direct, Ramakrishna said this, these people asked this. So it's one of the most unique books, and all you hear about is God all the time in those 4 years. That is something very, very unique. In fact, when we study the gospel, we have such a joy just to see his simplicity, his egolessness. And it was Mahendranath Gupta was a friend of Swami Vivekananda. He was a youth of like 28 years old. And at that time in Calcutta, they would go to Brahma Samaj meetings and other meetings. And there was a new temple built in Dakshineshwar. They would just say, everybody knew there was this kind of an odd Swami living there who they say he saw God and he talks to Kali. So this was like a fame of him in Calcutta. So anybody who wants to take a look at him would go there. And that's how Mahendranath also was going through some depression in his life due to other things. So he just came and he was so fascinated with this person, and he had a habit of always writing in his diary. So he would, the same day he would enter into his diary, like, I met him, there were this many visitors, it was evening, it was nighttime, the ambience is described in the gospel. It's just like going back to that time to Dakshineshwar. And that's one of the source book. No matter how many times you read it, you get something new out of that book. And he talks to Brahmo devotees, he talks to householders, he talks to his disciples. So it's all mixed up, but the answers are all same, like how we read 10 Upanishads, and it's the same thing in all the Upanishads. And that is what we see in the gospel. He doesn't digress from the main thing in any page. So I love reading the gospel. If I'm ever given a chance for a second talk on him, I would be reading from the gospel for you guys, and his little stories that he would tell. There is one story every 3 pages. There are 2 or 3 stories. So he's told so many stories. I'll go to people who don't know him. His life story, 1836 to 1886. He was born in a small village called Kamarpukur. He's a few certain miles from Calcutta. And parents, very interesting. I want to spend a few minutes about his parents. Kshudiram Chattopadhyaya, father. Mother was Chandramani Devi. And Kshudiram was a very devout Vaishnava. And their family deity was Raghuvira. And he's known for him walking all the way to Rameshwara to see Shiva, even though he is a Vaishnava. And another time he goes to Gaya to do tarpana for his ancestors, which was considered the tradition for most people to once go to Gaya. So there in that Vishnupada temple, where we have the Gadadhara Vishnu as the deity there, when he's sleeping in his dream, Vishnu comes with full splendor and tells him that I want to be born in your house. And Kshudiram gets scared. In his dream also, he says, he's like, I'm so poor, I'm a poor Brahmin, I cannot take care of you. And he gets scared. And then suddenly that breaks his sleep and he comes back home. And at the same time, Chandramani Devi gets a very unusual experience. She would be visiting a Shiva temple in her village. And as she is in that Garbhagudi or Sanctum Sanctorium, a light comes from that linga and she loses consciousness. And then her friends take her home, and within a few weeks, she comes to know she's with child. So that was a very interesting background of his parents. And Ramakrishna himself tells his disciples later that his father was, when he did Gayatri Japa, his chest would get all red and tears would be flowing down from his eyes. He said he would be so serious in doing the Japa. His childhood in his village is only for 14 years. Interesting phenomenon at age 7. He's walking through a paddy field and it's going to be cloudy, and he sees this dark black clouds. He'll be eating puffed rice, which is very common as a breakfast or something in Bengal. And against that black cloudy background, he sees white egrets flying, and he gets absorbed in this beautiful scenery, completely still, and he falls down to the ground. That was his first state, what we call, I'll be describing what that samadhi is, but that was his first experience at age 7. And at age 9, I just want to show you how unorthodox he goes on breaking rules throughout to prove that all these things happen, I guess. He's given Upanayana ceremony at the age of 9. And for the first bhiksha, he wants to get the bhiksha from Dhani, his nursemaid, who is a blacksmith lady. He just insists, I will only take bhiksha from her, And then we also know that he did not like to go to school. So he only went up to 3rd standard. And when Vivekananda teased him later, like, oh, you are an illiterate. And he said, well, I didn't want the breadwinning education. This is what he argues. And then in the village, he's known to listen to Harikathas and Puranas. And he likes to dress up as an actor. He would play Radha, Prahalada, Shiva. And one day when he was dressed up like Shiva, he again goes into Samadhi on the stage. And everybody thought it was his acting, but he couldn't even move. So people had to carry him away from the stage. So there are certain things that is very unusual about Ramakrishna, that he hears a God's name or a particular note in music or anything, he goes into this Bhava Samadhi. That was in childhood. He'd also make statues of gods and goddesses when he was young. He was an artistic bent of mind. And his father dies at the age of, when he's still 9 years old. So then his brother Ram Kumar moves to Calcutta to open a Sanskrit school. And he's by profession a priest. So he thinks, okay, Ramakrishna can come and help if he's not going to school anyway. Actually, Ramakrishna was originally named Gadadhar because Vishnu had appeared. And later on, the name gets changed to Ramakrishna. He was Gadai. He was called Gadai in his village. And he comes to Calcutta, and brother thinks he's going to help him for his going to all these people's houses and doing puja. He totally refuses. He says, I'm not doing that to get 2 bananas, a coconut, and a bag of rice. He says, I'm not going to do that. And then the Leela, why he was born, gets unfolded in Dakshineshwar. There will be this rich lady called Rani Rasmani. Actually, in the biography, my guru writes that she was one of the attendants of Kali, or something he described, Yogini or something like that. So she has accumulated a lot of, been saving money to go to Kashi, to do a elaborate puja for Kashi Vishwanatha and Annapurna. She's a big Kali devotee. And then after she's keeping on dreaming that I should go to Varanasi, then her husband passes away and she becomes a widow. And then on the one night before she's supposed to travel to Kashi, Kali appears to her in her dream and says, you don't have to come to Varanasi. Build me a temple right here on the bank of Ganges, and I will make that Murti Sakara for you. I make it alive. And so she buys this 20-acre plot of land right on the bank of Ganges and builds the most beautiful, very well-built Dakshineshwar temple. And that is where, when the temple is built, she hires Ramakrishna as a priest, and he'll be just 17, 18 at the time. And another unique thing about the temple is today's temples in America, how we have not just one deity, we have all the deities in that same temple. Same thing she does. In this temple complex, there are 12 Shivalingas on one side, and then there is the Mother Kali's temple. And then on the other side, there is the Radha Kanta temple, which is Radha and Krishna. So it's a very unique environment at that time. And everybody is fascinated with this young priest. He takes hours to decorate Kali. He takes hours to do Naivedya and bring the best flowers for her decoration. So elaborate puja. And he sings a very soulful bhajans to Kali. So after 1 or 2 years of that, some change happens in him, and he actually wants to see Kali. So one day every day he would put his hand under her nose and say, is she alive? Is she breathing? And then in nighttime, he would come back. Did she eat my Naivedya or not? And then finally, he gets very sad one day evening after puja. He says, okay, if she doesn't show herself to me, and from that same statue of Kali, he pulls the sword and he says, I'm going to kill myself if it's not worth living anymore if she doesn't show herself. and he just falls down. Before that, I think Kali appears for him, and he tells later of that experience and says, mother was soothing me down with her hand, and I was crying, and for 2 days I walked around in this blissful glow around me. So that was a very unusual experience. And then right after that, again, he gets restless. He wants to see Kali every day. He wants to talk to Kali almost on a daily basis. One of the Swamijis writes that he humanized his relationship with Kali and divinized his relationship to the other people around him. So it was so real for her. Kali this, Kali that, all the time. And then if one of us had that darshan, we would have stopped all our sadhanas, but he had in him, I think he came down to teach everybody. So he had what we call a divine discontentment. He would always want to do more. So after that, he starts, that Dakshineshwar temple is so big, it has a forest in itself. There is a cremation ground there. So he started doing a lot of Tantra sadhana, Shakta. He was influenced by Ramaprasad, who was maybe 100 years before him, and who had seen Kali through all this Shakta and Tantra sadhana. So he starts doing all that, and he can barely keep his clothes on. He's meditating all night without even a wink of sleep and everything. Everybody starts thinking he's sick. So his mother hears about it, and that is when she says, we have to get you married to get rid of this sickness that you're not able to. He couldn't even do the priestly duties anymore. They had to hire another priest, but they liked him so much. They said, you have to live here with us. So they had a house for him, and so he lived there until the Rani's son-in-law dies. So all his life he stayed in Dakshineshwar. That is the biggest pilgrimage place for us. That is the time when his mother says, you have to get married. And he says, wait, let me go and ask Mother Kali. So anything he had to get permission from Kali. He says, let me go ask, and Kali gives permission. And then when they're looking for a bride, they're not able to find a suitable girl. Then he himself tells her, in this Mukherjee's house in Jairambati, there is this 5-year-old girl. I would like to get married to her. So he marks Sharda Devi. And that is how he gets married. And later on, she comes to Dakshineshwar after 10 or 12 years. And Ramakrishna is 18 years older than Sri Sharda Devi. Now, interesting things happen. He's young, and all his gurus, like 2 of his major gurus, show up on his doorstep. One is Bhairavi Brahmani. She comes and teaches him further on the Shakta tradition. And another one is Totapuri. He's the highest Dvaitik of the Puri Sannyasi order. He comes after Bhairavi Brahmani leaves. He comes. And one interesting thing, when Bhairavi Brahmani is here, she realizes that Sri Ramakrishna knows more than her. So then she declares there, calls a convention of Pandits and says, he is an avatar. And they come and examine him and all that. And they do declare him to be an avatar by the Vaishnavas and all the other sects there. And Ramakrishna couldn't care less. He'll be laughing. Why are they making so much noise? And his nephew says, guess what, uncle, you have been declared an avatar. And you know what he says? He says, good, that means I'm not sick at least. You know, that's all he says. You know, he's not interested in that Avatara or anything like that. And one very important thing during his Shakta sadhana, he worships Sharada Devi as Kali on a Palaharini day and midnight. And he puts her in the Kali and even offers her, they call it the Shodashi Puja. And then he performs elaborate puja and offers her Naivedya. And they say that a lot of siddhis were bestowed on her, and she becomes Mother Kali. So that's how we see Ramakrishna as the Brahman and she is the Shakti. That's how we see them. Another thing about sadhana, after the Totapuri is a Nirguna Upasaka. And how interesting is he tells, okay, I'm going to take you to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And he teaches him for almost 1 month. And then he says, okay, now let us, you have to give up the thought of Mother Kali, he says. Ramakrishna is not able to do that because he's so attached to Mother Kali. Then one fine day, Totapuri gets annoyed, and he says, he picks up a piece of glass right there on the floor, and he pokes him in between his eyebrows and makes a wound and says, okay, just focus on that pain and try to not think of Mother Kali. And then Ramakrishna tells his disciples later that with the sword of discrimination, he's able to cut Mother Kali into two, and he stays in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 3 whole days at that time. And Totapuri is shocked because it took him 40 years to reach that stage. But this young man had just got it just like that. And another funny thing is, Ramakrishna actually teaches Totapuri to believe in the mother. He says Saguna and Nirguna are both same. He says one is another form of the other. And he teaches Totapuri. One day he gets a lot of tummy pain. He almost wants to kill himself. And then he says, why don't you ask mother? She can fix you. And slowly Totapuri starts believing in Mother Kali. The same thing he does to Swami Vivekananda as well, who did not believe in Murti or Mother Kali. He finally comes to accept Mother. And then very unique sadhanas, like in the Bhakti path, we have the bhavas, right? Like the Vatsalya bhava, the Madhura bhava, and Dasya bhava. He practices all this. And I have the slide presentation I will show you, where he gets the Rama to show up when he's feeding that Ramlala statue. And then when he's doing the Dasya bhava for a year as Hanuman, he's literally like Hanuman. He says, then Mother Sita appears for him. Then when he goes to Vrindavan, he stays 6 hours in Samadhi in front of Yamuna. He can see Vasudeva crossing with Krishna on that river. And there in Vrindavan, he becomes Radha. He says, only if I become Radha will Krishna show up. And Krishna actually shows up for him. So he does all these bhakti traditions, and I have pictures to show that. So those were all very interesting sadhanas we see. And another unique thing is he was like a potter. He would mold different people into different molds. If there were these Chaitanya devotees at that time, and they would only talk about Leelas of Krishna, and he would teach them about Nirguna Brahman. So he would do one or the other. So whoever was this, like, he would change them to the other side. And with all his sadhanas in the Tantra tradition, he had a lot of siddhis, but where he could touch Vivekananda and make him see, lose consciousness of the outer world. But he always told the disciples, do not get distracted with siddhis. He would say, you can do yoga, you can do meditation, but just ignore the siddhis and throw it like trash. He always taught the disciples that. So at this point, I want to describe what is that samadhi that Ramakrishna very frequently went into. And recently I heard Swami Sarvapriyananda describing it as, it is called intense absorption, almost like an extreme form of pratyahara, where there is no connection to the real world, and he's completely absorbed into the other. And some people loosely say he lost consciousness, but Swami Sarvapriyananda said that when somebody is playing a music and he likes the name of certain god or a raga, he goes into samadhi, but he stays standing. He doesn't fall down, he stays. But if the musician ever played a wrong note, he would break that samadhi and come out. So that means he was in this world, but he was also in another world. So people call it like he had a window into the Maya. So he could be in both realms. That intense absorption is what is described. Ramakrishna himself said, bring me a picture of this mother bird sitting on her eggs. So there is intense absorption, I believe, when she does that. And you could put a hand in front of the mother bird, she won't even see you. So that is the kind of absorption. And I have that picture in my slides. Another thing is called, also call him what is called Bhavamukha or Vignani. So a Vignani, meaning normal sense, we call it like an experiential person who is not just the theory of the spiritual realms, but he is experienced. But here, Ramakrishna himself tells this story, and I want to tell you that story is, in Advaita, he says you have to go with the steps, like a staircase of neti, 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 and you go to the rooftop. And on the rooftop is where Brahman is. He says, but there are very few people and who can come back from that state. And he turns around. They say only Ishvara Kotis do that. They see the staircase is all made of Brahman only. And so they come back and enjoy this. But Ramakrishna used to say that it's like you being a salt doll. You go near the ocean to check out Brahman. Ocean is the Brahman, but you cannot retain your identity. You go and lose in it and not able to come back into the real world. Another Tantra expert recently has described it as the Kundalini Yoga. So Ramakrishna could reach the Sahasrara, but he preferred to stay at the 6th chakra so that his love for God and love for devotees kept a little bit of that ego left, and he could revel in this world like that. It's a very interesting way of describing. And another one description I want to tell you before I go to the slide is, he told this story, even though he never read scriptures, was not literate and all that. He talks about this, how big is Brahman in terms of, he says there is an ant goes to this sugar hill, takes one block of that sugar and just absolutely enjoys it. And on the way back, thinks that next time I will come and take the whole ant, the sugar hill back to her people. And Ramakrishna says, even great people like Vyasa and Shuka are nothing but big ants, and nobody can really understand that entire sugar hill that it is. I think that's pretty much. In my slide, I'm going to show you a wonderful book, which was just published 2 or 3 years ago. It's called The Plurality of Religion as described by Sri Ramakrishna. He's one of the rising stars like Sarvapriyananda. He is actually finished philosophy in California, PhD in philosophy. He has studied Kant and everything, and he became a brahmachari. He was called Ayan Maharaj, but now he's called Swami Medhananda. He presented this paper in Harvard and in the International World Religion Forum and everything. So now that is the main thing that's attracting people, is this plurality of religion and how Ramakrishna came to prove that. So I will show you some of my slides. Okay, so that's, so Ramakrishna was photographed about 3 times, and those are all, that's another uniqueness about this avatar, is we have real pictures of him. And that's Sri Sharada Devi. That's the shrine in my house. This was a photograph taken in a photography studio. So this is the real Ramakrishna. That's him. See, this is the Gadadhara we talk about, which Shudiram getting that dream and being scared that this is his, after Upanayana, him taking the Bhiksha from Dhani. The first samadhi that Ramakrishna had was in this scenario. And Swami Sarvapriyananda describes that if it was one of us, we would still have some thoughts about the color of these birds or the color. So he was like no vrittis in his mind at all. There was no thoughts. And that is how he got completely absorbed into that scene. See, this is in this contemporary Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a big name in Brahma Samaj. In his house, he was giving a talk and he goes into samadhi. You see how his hands stay in that same, it's almost like the game of statue that children play. So you cannot disturb him for, then he comes out of it like sleepwalking. I have a description in the Viveka Chudamani regarding that 426, I think, where it describes that they're sleepwalking almost. When he comes out, he would talk slowly, walk slowly, as if he was getting used to this realm and he came from another realm. And this is a picture to show you when he is in that samadhi, he seemed and looked so blissful. It's that bliss that he was experiencing in that other realm. This is the sword he took from Kali to cut himself before she gives him that darshan. See, that sword is right there in her hand. That is the real statue in Dakshineshwar that's being worshipped. This is the puja that he does for Sharda Devi. Shodashi puja on that Falaharini day for Mother Sharda. This is the Tantric Bhairavi Brahmani who comes to teach him the Shakta tradition. For 1 year, she teaches him all the different methodology. This sadhu is a Jatadhari. He gives him a small baby statue of Rama, and Rama appears like that for Sri Ramakrishna. This is in his meditative, he does practice for 1 whole year, the Dasya Bhava of Hanuman, and Mother Sita appears for him in that phase. And this will be in a very rich person's house. Like I told, everybody was westernized at that time. This picture of Mother Mary and baby Jesus was hanging, and a light enters him from there, and he goes and he decides to do that sadhana for 1 whole year after that. And that is how he's able to say that, yeah, Jesus is also real, and that tradition. And he actually practices with a Sufi saint Islam for 1 whole year. He does that. He actually wants to go inside a church and see how the sermon is being done, but he stays outside of the church. Yeah, this is the best thing. Within a few minutes in New York, Swami Vivekananda drew this picture, and this becomes the emblem of the Ramakrishna order. So the snake here is this is the representing the Kundalini Yoga. So when you awaken all the chakras, then you get that siddhi. And the swan is the Paramahamsa, Sri Ramakrishna. And the sun in the background is the rising Gnana. That is the Gnana Yoga. And the waves is the Karma Yoga, the waves of work. So that is what. And the lotus, he says, is the Bhakti. So this he just wrote in, there's an anecdote also how somebody on the back of an envelope, which was old envelope, he says, okay, this is going to be somebody said, you need an emblem for your order. And he draws this, Swami Vivekananda. So this is a few weeks before Ramakrishna dies. He's very sick for almost a year with the throat cancer. He'll be in Kasipur garden. This is his own drawing. And this face in the front is Swami Vivekananda. And the peacocks is the number of people. He says in Bengali, Naren will teach. Naren says, no, I'm not doing anything like that. And he says, yes, you will. And your entire, see, Naren will teach others. He says, he hesitated. I won't do that. The master replied, you shall have to do it. My siddhis will manifest through you in time. And we know how true that came. 2 weeks before Ramakrishna died, this is his own writing in Bengali. And this is this beautiful picture. I think it was hanging in somebody's house, but I think this is Keshav Chandra Sen, that is Sri Ramakrishna. But look at the harmony of all these religions. There is the Chaitanya followers, there is the Jesus, there is the Padri from the church, there is Islam. So Ramakrishna always wanted that everyone should work together. So, I mean, he really wanted that concept. In fact, there is a Swami Sarvapriyananda told me this. There is a Muslim lady on Ramadan will send kheer to the ashram in New York. She says there are so many Islam people who go to the Ramakrishna ashramas in East Bengal. This is Rabindranath Tagore writing to Paramahamsa Ramakrishna Deva. Through your course of worship, from varied springs of fulfillment have mingled in your meditation. The manifold revelation of the joy of the infinite has given form to a shrine of unity in your life, where from far and near arrive solutions to which I join mine own. Rabindranath Tagore. And Mahatma Gandhi said, studying Ramakrishna was seeing God in person. And this is the interfaith emblem in most Ramakrishna orders in the West. This is in St. Louis. So we always have an interfaith dialogue. Even in Providence, we have a Swamiji at Harvard, Swami Tyagananda also. Everybody has the interfaith dialogue. They make an attempt to study other religions contemporarily as well, so that they try to understand us and we try to understand them. This is a very nice devotee. I have to mention about him. He will be a dramatist and a theater owner, Girish Chandra Ghosh. He'll be an alcoholic, and but he would at that time produce plays on Prahalada and all spiritual topics. And look at all these ladies who are actresses, and Ramakrishna blesses them, and they become such great devotees of Ramakrishna. They were called downtrodden at that time. Nobody would talk to them. Nobody would invite them for a puja or anything because they had chosen acting as a profession. So that Girish Chandra Ghosh, when Ramakrishna knew he was very pure at heart and he couldn't give up his drinking, and Ramakrishna wanted to help him spiritually, and he says, can you at least take the name of God 3 times a day? And Girish Chandra says, I cannot. I am not sure I can even do that. And then Ramakrishna gives this wonderful word that all of us should hear, that, okay, then you give your power of attorney to me. I will do that for you. And Girish Chandra Ghosh said, okay, that's easy. I will give it to you. And from that day onwards, Ramakrishna infuses his mind that anytime he wants to drink alcohol, Ramakrishna's face appears there in the glass. So Ramakrishna takes complete charge of him, and he becomes some of his Sanskrit devotional hymns to Sri Ramakrishna are just amazing, that he becomes a total convert. In fact, Ramakrishna wants to give him an ochre robe. To that order, Girish Chandra Ghosh evolves himself to be a sannyasi at that time. And these are the group of people, his 16 disciples, that look how they look, and what has become, how great each one of their disciples, if you go on counting, it's wonderful to see each one of them lighted so many hearts with that spiritual devotion. They were poor, they didn't have a single penny, no room to stay, no house, but look at that order today, how it is. This is how they were when Ramakrishna passed away. Oh, this is Ramakrishna telling story of the ego. Like, if you're too big, like a shark, Vivekananda's style, you'll escape Maya. But if you're too small and have no ego, you will escape the fisherman's net. But the rest of us will be caught in the Maya's net, he says. And this one, he says, I am so colorful. Ramakrishna was very colorful. He says, I don't want to play just one raga, poo. I want all raga and raginis, he used to say. So this is what's depicted. And this is the famous picture. He says that mother bird is actually only focused on those eggs and nothing else. So he says our absorption in God should be like that. Okay, on top is the Belur Mutt, on the other side of the Ganges. And on this side, this is the famous Dakshineshwar temple that Rani Rasmani actually built. And it's a great place of pilgrimage. You can still see Sharda Devi's little 5x5 room that she would cook for Sri Ramakrishna. And that is my guru in St. Louis, Swami Chetanananda. He's written so many books that for thousands of years, this is all in posterity, all these pictures and books. He wrote a book called God Lived with Them and They Lived with God, and seeing God with open eyes, as well as the pictorial biography of Sri Ramakrishna. And he's bringing out a pictorial biography of the Holy Mother next year. And so many books on Swami Vivekananda, prolific writer. This is the book. This is the rising star, the young Ayan Maharaj. Now he's called on YouTube Swami Medhananda. He speaks brilliantly on this plurality of, it's called Infinite Paths to Infinite Reality, Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy of religion. That's it. I made it.
Thank you. Thank you. It is absolutely fascinating. If you can, would you please tell us about how your brother-in-laws became the monks of the order?
Okay. My mother-in-law, there is a very famous Swamiji in Bangalore called Swami Purushothamananda. He was a disciple of Swami Yatishwarananda, whose guru was a direct disciple. So this generation keeps continuing producing. So Swami Purushothamananda was a household name in Bangalore at that time, very vocal about Gita and Vachanaveda and all that. My mother-in-law was from a little village. She comes to Bangalore and not very well-to-do, but one thing is she loved going to the Ramakrishna Ashrama in Baswangudi. And she was very much into it. And my father-in-law gets and Purushothamananda actually ran a Balagokulam. So very strict. You have to be not 1 second late for those classes. So my two brother-in-laws would go to his Balagokulam. So Balavihar class. And they knew Purushothamananda would come to her house for Bhiksha many times. And it was like a very good bond between Swamiji and them. Then when my youngest brother-in-law, when he was 18, almost getting ready to enter college, his father, my father-in-law had a stroke. So he was bedridden. So, but his mind was made up. He says, I have nothing else in this world. I want to join. So he insisted and joined, even while his father was sick. But his older brother, the next one, my husband did not allow him to join. He said, leaving the living God at home to serve your father, how can you go and serve Ramakrishna? He said, so that brother served the father. We were in America at the time, and he served his father. But after his father died, that suffering they saw in the human body kind of made them realize that this is the end for a lot of us. And so he requested permission after my father-in-law passed away to his older brother, which is my husband, saying, I really want to join. And that's how they joined. And we were skeptical about the youngest one and did not know that he knows what he wants. But when we went back to India, he was in Mysore Ashrama at that time, very happy. So they are brahmacharis for 8 years, and then they go to Belur Math, and they have to pass rigorous testing because they can kick them out in that brahmachari time for 8 or 9 years. Only then are given the ochre robe. So he is now in Ranchi, in charge of a TB sanatorium near Ranchi. And I have been everywhere, to see firsthand how these ashramas work. And they're given freedom to go and do in solitude. You want to do Advaita, go and do it. You want to do yoga, you do whatever you want, as well as do karma yoga on a daily basis. So yeah, it's been wonderful,
You had told me this this background, but I wanted our listeners to know
that. Yeah, I want to share just 1 minute of my personal experience with this. Is 2 times I had this. Sharda Devi herself came to Bangalore. And there is a Sharada rock in Baswangudi Ashrama. So people go up to the rock because she put her foot on it, and there she meditates, and Swami Ramakrishna sings the Sarvamangala Mangalya song to her there, and she becomes like a Devi there. So that is the most attended spot in actually that Bangalore Ashrama. On Sharda Devi Jayanti, the line goes that far to even go there. What I experienced was, I was still a novice at meditation, and all of us know is how difficult it is to keep the mind still. But you sit on that rock, you're gone. No, the whole world disappears for you. So I experienced that on that Sthala Mahime, they call it, right? In that Mother's Rock, you can sit there, and that's where the sun is setting. And that is how she also loved it. She saw the sunset and she sat in meditation there. The second time I went to Belur Math, and we actually had to stay inside the compound of the Belur Math, because the Arati, the morning meditation starts at 5:30 a.m. So if you are living in staying in a hotel, outside the gates won't be open. So we had to stay inside, and I attended that meditation. Oh my God, meditating with 1,000 pure-souled brahmacharis and sannyasis, your mind is not on this earth at all, And in fact, my husband, on an impulse, on a one-day trip, took all my my children and son-in-law and daughter-in-law to Belur Math. He said, I have to do this. Just before he died, on that same year, 2014, I was visiting Swami Jagadatmananda, and I didn't go second time, but he took all the kids on a flight same day and came back the same night. He said, I have to show this, look at it. And he passed away that same year. And these people remember that, that he took us to Belur Math, So yeah, those 2 meditation, even now in St. Louis, when I go and stay there, you have to meditate with the Swamis at between 5:30 to 7. So he incorporates bhakti and yoga and Advaita, and all Swamis give very good. It's a place of learning, which we are trying to do our temples here now, right? It should become places of learning, that God realization should be taught from early on, like that is your goal of life. And that's what I heard. And Anantkini, that's what he said we celebrated Ramakrishna Jayanti last month by reading the gospel, and we told everybody's experience of how Ramakrishna entered their life. And Anantkini also said the same thing, that he's the only person who makes you, pushes that idea that purpose of life is to realize God. It's like a simple statement in every ashram that you go there. It's like, you have to realize God in this life. And my mother-in-law stayed with us for 15 years. And, I'm just so fortunate that Ramakrishna chose me. I did not choose him. He chose me to come into this household, so.
And it's also, I am also so blessed to have met your mother-in-law too.
Yes. She would tell these Ramakrishna stories to my kids all night. That's all we played in our house.
That's what makes your presentation today so fascinating, because of your intimate experiences with the whole order, and also coming from your own family. And so thank you for this excellent presentation. And we do look forward to your next presentation, where you can take all the stories of Ramakrishna Paramahansa and then frame them into frame them into the Vedanta Prameyas. So that way.
Yeah. Actually, one of the Swamis of the order, Swami Sridharananda, he's in Australia. He's such a realized soul. People, you have to sit just in the room with him. You can feel the presence of a realized soul, so that is what amazes me about this order, that it continues to produce these giants. Harshananda, you saw 50 years of service. Look at his Sanskrit verse. He did Suprabhata for Sri Ramakrishna in Sanskrit, and his Ashtotara and everything in Sanskrit.
We are fortunate he lived to 91 years and
yes,
just last year he passed away. Yeah.
Right. And then we see Sarvapriyananda, what a star, brings Vedanta into every household now. Youth from Canada are listening to him. Sweden, people are listening,
Actually, we have been wanting to bring Swami Sarvapriyananda onto Pratibha Mancha. Sangeeta is working on that.
Yeah, he actually came to my house and did the Sadhana Chatushtaya.
Yes.
Yes. So, I think it's a great resurrection of, if you see the news, in fact, Indonesia president or king, I'm not sure, he reads the gospel 10 pages every night before he goes to sleep. He says it is so refreshing to read that, he says. So it keeps spreading. In fact, on our satsanga on Sundays, we have every Sunday with Swami Chaitnyananda on Zoom. People from Hungary, from Romania, from Brazil, Argentina join us, and they are translating this into their languages.
Excellent.
So that is so nice to see that, to see that. Yeah, I'm fortunate to know him.
Thank you very much.
Just wanted to add, we're from Indianapolis. There are so many ashrams, maybe, but we have a shrine very close by in our house. That is Hema's house. Correct. And that's the shrine by itself. That's the ashram by itself. And no one goes without, with the hospitality that we the excellent hospitality as well. And that's an ashram, and that's a shrine. It's wonderful to have Hema's guidance on so many of those, matters in this spiritual journey. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So next talk will be on April 11th. It's going to be on Narayaniyam, part 2 by Hari Narayana Swami. And so I look forward to have you all in the next Pratibha Mancha presentation on April 11th by Hari Narayana Swami on Narayaniyam. It will be the second of the talks. And of course, we are yet to hear about the life of Swami Vivekananda. We'll come to that.
And Sharda Devi has to be spoken about.
And Sharda Devi.
He is just, all the sannyasis actually pray to her, not to Sri Ramakrishna. So she is a revival itself.
Absolutely. You might have heard Anjana Shiva Prasad speak on Sharda Devi.
Sharda Devi, yes.
So, but then, of course, we can have more on that. Definitely.
Yeah.
So with that, thanks to everybody. We'll conclude our session unless anybody has any question.
There is no question, but I might add to what Anant Kini said, that Hemaji's house was like Gurukul for us, where Ashwatji would come and teach us. So we were very fortunate. I hope we can start that again after COVID goes away.
And it was always peaceful.
COVID has gone away, so we will.
So we will do that. We will do that.
Go to the room and sit there for a few minutes. And it was wonderful.
Yeah. In fact,
in my heart.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. In fact, I was so motivated. Anant Kini, I was asking, where did you meet Ramakrishna? He said, in your house, that shrine is like resplendent with Ramakrishna in our old house also and here also. He said, your shrine is what reminds me of Ramakrishna all the time.
And we saw Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi also.
Right, Ramana Maharshi too.
Very special, yes.
Whatever you do that, it should be on Zoom so we can also join.
Undoubtedly, we'll make that happen.
Oh, I need Shubrato's address. I want to send him the biography of pictures. You know,
Please.
please.
I'll text it to you.
Yeah, please. I bought a bunch of copies from my guru because he had published it. So I have copies to give it to all the devotees, so I can mail it to you. It's beautiful picture in meditation.
So more, about more than the presentation, she is able to present all these books and all this good, information about Swamiji's. The pictures you saw, the references. There are so many possibilities to learn about Ramakrishna from Hema as well. So it's amazing. We are grateful to everything that you do, Hema, on this thing, and lucky for us that you are able to inspire so many of us. Thank you.
Hemaji, I'm too biased to say anything, so I won't say anything. But my journey started with Aswaji at your house. It is a Gurukul. I bow to you. Thank you.
It's a sadhaka's house. It's a sadhaka's house, not, Guru is not here for the last 2 years now.
Hemaji, I did not know anything about Ramakrishna, but you really enriched my knowledge and spirituality. You speak so well, so clearly. Everything is in my heart and mind.
Thank you.
Second thing is, I grew up with Ramakrishna and Paramahamsa and Vivekananda. My father used to hang Ramakrishna photo in my home, like Vivekananda. Then we have a Shiva photo also. Then we have a Christ photo also.
Yes,
but I always grow up in that. When I came to your home, when I see in your puja room, I see all the Ramakrishna photos, and I used to remember my childhood.
Oh,
but doing all this, my father never educated us on Ramakrishna. We know we have photos, but you really enriched my knowledge, because I don't read that much spirituality and all that, but I just listen to you. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. Even if one person goes home and thinks what a wonder he lived 186 years ago, I would feel happy that I did my job today.
Hemaji, one more thing. I hope you'll start Satsanga very soon. We missed that one for the last 2.5 years.
We should now the COVID is out of the way.
Yes. I missed that one, Satsang. It was great.
I miss the food.
That is true. Plenty of food. Yes.
This is what Ramakrishna would say. He would come out of his samadhi and want jalebi and rasgulla. He says,
Bhajia. He liked bhajia.
There's a famous saying, Bhuke bhajan na hoye Gopala.
Yes. No, Hemaji not only just serves a lot of food, but she packs me food. So when I go on the way, I can have dinner too. Yes.
And I must also say that probably the Indianapolis is one of the epicenters for Ashwatji's lectures also. I think there is a lot of in this satsang. Indianapolis became Indianapolis as a center because of Hema.
No, actually, Anant actually introduced
to
me.
No, I'm not bringing that up, but I think this has become for Chittuji came here, and Indianapolis became the center.
No,
because
Vimal Patel had him for an architect of puja or something, and then Anand introduced me to Ashwatji.
But
anyhow, is a close second.
Yeah, and anyhow, Hemaji and Anant are responsible to having this satsang in Indianapolis.
And Kumar.
We'll work on it.
Yes.
Kumarji, I think, introduced Ashwatji to Indianapolis.
Indian
Yeah,
Apostolic.
he invited, Kumar invited Aswatji for the first time for the Gita class.
Gita Mandal. Yeah.
It's nice to look at our journey like this, how far we have come. It's so amazing.
Yes.
Ashwath is this thread, like Krishna says, we are all these beads, he's the thread. Ashwath is the thread.
Yes, but Hemaji, I am the only one who has moved.
Very nice. We heard that. Okay. It was
Thank
so
you.
good.
Thank you.
Oh, you were there too.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, we were
Wonderful.
here, Hemaji.
Thank
On
you,
that
Sidhu,
note,
for reminding me.
Oh, yeah, we should do satsanga, Hamsa.
Yeah, we should.
Pranam to everyone.
Pranam.
Om
Thank you, everybody.
Purnamadah Purnamidam
Purnat Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hopefully we will meet in June.